Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, a show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm Carl, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Callie.
Hi, Carl.
Callie, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Enjoying some nice spring weather. We were talking beforehand about how we don't have to do this how's the weather banter, but here I am doing it anyway.
It's hard to avoid. I'm feeling the same way. Excited for a holiday weekend. Excited for spring.
Yeah. So you are here with us this week because you are this week's host, and you spoke with a guest that we all know pretty well here at Monotype and are quite fond of. Why don't you tell us who this week's guest is?
This week, I spoke with our own Juan Villanueva. He is a senior type designer at Monotype. He happened to have the most amazing hair on our episode, actually. Our audio engineer were both commenting on it. We had a really nice time talking about everything from design to cycling to some of his kind of extracurricular activities outside of work. He's an educator, so it was a really great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we've had someone from Monotype on as a guest. We've had obviously plenty of different hosts. You know, this podcast isn't really about us or about Monotype or what we're doing here, but we kind of made an exception for Juan because he has such an active sort of professional life outside of Monotype and is involved in a lot of really interesting things that we wanted to highlight. So what are some of the topics you and Juan discussed in this week's episode that our listeners should be looking forward to?
Yeah, so I think one overarching theme is that, so he was originally born in Peru and, he talked about moving to the United States, growing up in New Jersey, and how kind of learning a new language and kind of sort of becoming obsessed with languages and lettering has informed his career in design and his interest in kind of being a design communicator. And then he's also really big in the design education community. So he teaches workshops. He is a lead educator of Type West Online at the Letterform Archive. He's taught at places like Type at Cooper, the City College of New York. And he's also the founder of something called Type Crit Crew, which is this really nice initiative. And I guess it's more of a platform now that helps to connect students with experienced designers. So I think, he has a wealth of experience of what it was like to be a student designer and kind of trying to break it into the industry. So he's works now to help connect students with people that they can look up to as mentors to kind of get feedback on things like their portfolio or projects. So, and then we also kind of touched on a little bit of the stuff that he does at Monotype, which is really exciting. So things like designing the M&M's typeface and work for Tencent. So it's a fun one.
Yeah. No, Juan's one of those people where when you sort of look at the full collection of everything he does, you sort of wonder when he actually sleeps or feeds himself, because he's an incredibly busy person.
Exactly. And that's something we talked about too. So he's, a huge lover of lettering. And one of the things we talked about is how do you make time for that where it feels like, a creative pursuit on the side that it doesn't feel like work. So he talks about things like running and cycling that help him kind of stay, I guess, grounded and kind of get out a lot of the energy so he can, really stay focused on being creative.
Well, definitely looking forward to this one. We all love Juan here at Monotype and was really excited that you guys were able to sit down. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you and Juan, and everybody, hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, Juan. Thanks for joining Creative Characters. We're really happy to have you here on the podcast today.
Hello. Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. I'm really happy to be here.
So I know you were born in Peru and you spent your teenage years in Clifton, New Jersey. What was that transition from life in Lima to New Jersey like?
That transition, I think it was full of very interesting things. I think there's always a challenge of, learning a new language, a new culture. Up until, a few years ago, I didn't realize it was much of a culture shock. It's always been for me, a new environment, just new challenges, just keep moving forward. That's been my attitude throughout my whole life. So being in a new country with a new language, that's kind of what it was. I taught myself how to speak English during one summer. So the next time when the school year started, I would be a more intermediate level of English. And it's always been like that. I was trying to challenge myself. But, apart from that, I think it also offered an opportunity in terms of exposure. New Jersey is a very, at least the part that it was very diverse. So in my high school, I met students from all over the world, especially in the in the ESL levels where everyone comes and no one really speaks English, but we all can communicate with each other. And I think that's just kind of like a beautiful thing. We all have the same struggle, if you will, in terms of language. So that helped me, like kind of like see other cultures and just get to know different people and try to develop a common language or a common struggle with the language. But I think that was the main takeaway for me is like well, perhaps the exposure to different cultures was a little bit limited back in Peru. Being in the US kind of like forced that upon me because it was present. And also, the language is kind of like you're immersed in it. So the only thing for you to do is just learn it so you can keep moving forward.
That's wild. Yeah. So how old were you when you moved to New Jersey?
I was, I think 14, or 15. Can't remember exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, my dad moved here from Canada and only spoke French, so he went through that same experience in preschool. So he had like a buddy that would help him essentially kind of navigate everything as he was learning English. But
and then you learn other words in like Arabic or like Hindi and things like that, But I forgot already. But as I was in high school, I was very curious about, how do you say this in your language? And we would like exchange things like that. And also like curse words that was very popular as a high school student.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean that was part of like growing up.
How do you think that factored into your interest in design and especially type design, like the exposure to different languages?
I think it affected me because it made me very sensitive towards that English, and also speaking Spanish, it makes me very sensitive that English is not the only spoken language. Just being bilingual in any aspect, I think, gives you that perspective. So I think in terms of design, I worked at a company where I was working on typography in multiple languages. So not only English, but localizing graphic assets into like 13 different languages, including Latin-based languages and also non-Latin-based languages like Chinese, Japanese. Things that, I was collaborating with a designer that was native in those scripts. So it wasn't just me copying and pasting, it was me copying, pasting, consulting, and working in the typography. So developing that sensitivity and collaboration was really useful, especially knowing that, when you're translating something into a different language, you can't simply just use Google Translate. You need a proper translator to translate context. And same with graphic assets, the length of the words change. So while certain words might keep the same length, if you're translating, let's say, a word into a German language where some words tend to be longer, right? Then you have to either redesign the graphic or design the graphic with that long word in mind so that things could be properly localized. So in terms of graphic design, those were the things that were very present early on in my career. And then in terms of type, I think it's, when you design a typeface, especially speaking Spanish, I can't design a typeface without the critics because, I cannot not type in Spanish. That is part of my design process. So, you can see the same probably point of view from people who English is not their main language, right? And diacritics are obviously really important to them. And the same goes with other scripts. So I think that relationship is very present in me all the time.
When do you think you first became interested in design and type design?
Yeah, I guess, I could even take this back to when I was a child because my parents used to buy me paper and, I guess coloring pencils. And I don't think they had the intentions of me being an artist because when I was in Peru, like that was not a viable career option. I didn't realize that wasn't a career option even until I graduated from high school here. So art was never something I would aspire to be, but it was something that I enjoyed, like drawing. And I taught myself how to draw, how to color, how to study composition by copying cartoons and things like that. So I think once I got to university, I was an engineer major, and then I realized that I really wanted to draw. And then I kind of like started understanding the fields of illustration and graphic design. So that is when I decided to switch to illustration. And, it took some convincing to my parents to be like, like this is something that is going to help me sustain, give me some income. But then, at the end of the day, it's still a competitive field. So doing illustration, kind of like I took some classes in graphic design. And like I was mentioning earlier, it's always like a challenge, and I always love learning. Going to the graphic design department, I realized how there's a potential to combine both skills. And just, I'm naturally curious about these things. So I took more classes. And, I kind of ended up doing a double major in illustration and graphic design. And through graphic design is where I discovered typography. And I realized that typography is a subject that takes a long time to learn. Like you can't do it in 1 semester or 2 semesters. You can get a good introduction, which we had a good introduction. My instructor in typography at Montclair State, he was really good. He was really amazing. Up until this day, we stay in touch because he was one of the people who inspired me to really like type and see the value in it. But at the same time, like I said, education in typography is very limited at the undergrad level. So I always try to go deep into whatever I'm into. So typography, I figure, is something that I was just not necessarily struggling with, but I knew there was more to discover. So I found out about this program called Type at Cooper, which is when I really became really good at typography or really good at type. And that is when I realized type design kind of has the creativity of design, the artistic aspects of just art, and then sort of this more technical software oriented aspects of engineering. And so I found the perfect trifecta there, and that is what led me to realize this is the thing I want to do, and that's it. I had no going back after that. There's no doubts about my choice in terms of that. But it's been quite a journey. It's never been there was not a pivotal moment where I realized that this is for me, other than being a type at Cooper and seeing that this is for me. But before that, it was mainly I like this, but it's hard to see an opportunity sometimes depending on your context. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah, I imagine the conversations with your parents switching from engineering to I can see that being tough.
Yeah, but they were very supportive, I gotta say. It's I told them, you've been buying me coloring books since I was a kid. What do you expect? They were if this is what you want to do and you want to take it seriously, I think, when parents see that the children, at least in my case, I was very serious about it. And I told them, this is my plan, right? They were okay, well, we're here, new country, new opportunities. You've worked really hard for this. And we believe you're going to succeed at whatever you want. So, because, they saw that I was determined. And I think that was key to get them on my side and be yeah, we'll support you.
So how do you think growing up close to New York City helped to shape your creative interests and your career? I know that just New York's such a melting pot and also a mecca for design. Do you think that influenced your path?
Yeah, for sure. I think, growing up close to New York City, so in New Jersey, right? 30-minute to an hour commute on bus or by the train, which makes it really easy to access a lot of culture, a lot of events, and meet a lot of people. So I think personally, in my own experience, what New York City did for me was give me the access. But, having access is not enough. You have to actually take advantage of it. So I would try to come to events and things like that throughout my whole time. So even before I attended Type at Cooper, I was going to all the lectures, going to all the gallery openings. I actually met some of the people at Monotype before I joined Monotype because I was going to all the Monotype exhibits to try to learn more about, type design and fonts and the history of type. So that was part of just me trying to learn without having anyone tell me this is what you need to do. I'm if I want to be part of this program, I should be probably part of that circle of people who are really in it. I ended up meeting some of the people from Type at Cooper before I joined the program. I think they ended up knowing me by sight because I was always there in the back. Like I said, commuting from New Jersey to New York, it's not always that easy, especially at night, but it was worth it. If you really want something, and, I was relatively close, sacrificing some sleep, some extra time. It was all worth it in the end, but it was also worth it at the time because I really wanted to do it. So I ended up learning a lot.
That actually segues nicely into kind of something else I wanted to talk about. So what are some of your passions and favorite activities outside of work?
Well, at work, it's a lot of fun making fonts for clients. I think that is really interesting for me. It's creative problem solving. Outside of work, I try to complement some of that with, I do a lot of teaching. And if the answer has to be non-type related, I like physical activities. I have a lot of energy, which helps me manage all of these things that I do. But it's also the fact that, I spend a lot of time sitting on my chair at my desk. So I used to swim a lot. And now, because of COVID, the gym got closed. So I started picking up cycling. and I need to like get better at it. But then, I've been running a lot recently since December. So now I can do like a sub 25 5K. And I think part of it is just like the challenge of it. It's like, can I do this? Can I push my body to do this? And like if you are disciplined, and it also helps your mental health, because when you work, sometimes you need a break. And for me, it's not enough to just go for a walk. I actually need to go on a really good run. So this past weekend, I went on a 10K run. It really helped me like reset. And so I can, be today, get back to work and be like fresh.
Yeah, the theme of challenging yourself is like very present in everything you've talked about. So that's interesting. Cycling in New York, though, must be scary. Are you cycling like inside in spin studios or like outside?
Yeah, I mean, I was scared for it for a long time. Even when I had a bike, I would just go in the park. Now I go in the park when I just do it as a workout. I'm trying to get better at riding on the streets. But riding on the streets, once you get used to it, it's not that bad. So I've been riding on the streets. It's easier for me to just go to the park and get my workout out of the way and also enjoy it, because that's also part of it. When I'm cycling or even when I'm running, it's very important to remember that not to get too much in your head, because it's still an activity that is supposed to relax you, or you're supposed to enjoy it. So I don't get road rage or anything like that. I'm like, okay, well, if obviously people got to cross and pedestrian are getting on the bike path, I'm like, okay, try to like slow down a little bit. And like, this is my time. Like, I'm not gonna let anyone take that away, and just like try to enjoy as much as I can. The moment you start yelling at people, that's when it becomes more of a, I don't know, it just becomes a little bit different, and I'm not too much into that.
Another thing that you love to practice outside of work is lettering and calligraphy. I wanted to understand, how do you keep up with these things without them feeling like work to you?
The lettering, calligraphy, or lettering mainly that I do is self-exploration. You can use the word challenge as well, but it's more like things that no one's paying me for, but things that I want to do just for fun to challenge myself. So I could try to draw letters that don't exist or that just came from my head and things like that, just because I'm trying a new technique or I'm trying a new style. And then I share them online and things like that. So it doesn't feel like work, because no one's telling me you need to do this and resize it or make it work for this kind of scenario. Like, there is no brief other than just making it. So yeah, that's why it doesn't feel like work. And I do whenever I have time. So in between breaks, let's say Christmas break, that's where I'm done with teaching. I'm taking time off from work, and I need to draw something. So I start doing that. And whenever I do need a kind of like a relaxing situation, I do just draw, because that is also my way of relaxing. Like, if I can go out on a bike or I can go out and run, like, I'm just going to sit and draw. Like, that is the way I relax. And like, again, making it really low pressure, as in like there's no outcome expected from this other than just whatever doodles you want to make. That's it. For me, that's what makes it fun.
What are some of your tips or creative practices that you couldn't live without?
Talking to people. I think that has been the most important thing, even throughout this pandemic that we're still struggling with. Even back then, it's always like have a group of people that you can stay motivated with. So that sense of community, I think that is something I can't live without. Even if I don't have time to draw sometimes, if I still have time to chat with people about things like that, it becomes really important. So if I can give a tip, find friends, find your community, find a mentor with whom you can talk about either work-related stuff or personal-related stuff, creative-related stuff, or even just, like fitness or mental health or anything like that. For me, it's all part of like a cohesive whole. So it's not like cycling is separate from my work and type. I feel like that also helps me, because I think through ideas while I'm cycling. And it's not work, it's just part of like how my brain works. It just needs to synthesize something while I'm doing something else.
It's like cycling thoughts. I don't know if you're aware of like the subreddit shower thoughts, where people have these epiphanies in the shower. That's really common, but it sounds like cycling and running is where you're having those like creative sparks.
Because you can't do anything else. Like, your hands you can't type, or you're not on your phone. It's just music. And yeah, it's just relaxing. I think that is difficult to find sometimes, that time to just relax and, let your brain just work on its own for a little bit. And that is when, creativity sometimes happens. Like whenever I have to give a talk, for example, my outline for the talk usually comes when I'm like doing an activity that is not design related, because that's when my brain is like, okay, I need to think about this, and it just comes out. Then I just write it down real quick.
Now we can sort of switch. I want to talk, a lot about your experience as an educator, because I know that's something you're really passionate about. So I know that you love sharing your knowledge and you teach classes, workshops, lectures. Can you tell me where and kind of what you're teaching right now or what you've been teaching recently?
Sure. Right now, I'm the lead instructor of the TypeWest online program, which is a full year certificate program in type design at the Letter from Archive, the online one. And we have 22 students from all over the world. And it's been really, really amazing to see their progress and their growth and how good they are. I've learned so much from them, as much as I think they've learned from me, and also from my co-instructors and the workshop instructors and our TAs. So I think part of the teaching is not just, imparting knowledge. It's building a team of collaborators with whom together, we sort of like build a class and we build a school. It's kind of like building a band, and then you kind of have to all play together, and you kind of have to have a plan, but then in the concert you just play and improvise, and that is what it is. It's I prepare for the program for like the second half of last year. So when we started in January with my co-instructor, Carl, we already had a plan set up. And then it's just a matter of like vibing off the students. Like, what do they need? Like, what do they want to learn? How do I give that to them? And how do I help them also challenge themselves, but also guide them so they don't get lost in the process of type? And obviously there are goals that I want to achieve with them. I want them to understand the basics of drawing, the basics of digitizing, the basics of looking at historical sources, research, all of that stuff. I think that's super interesting and important for them to understand, especially since it is their first term learning type design. So regardless of their level in terms of like whether they are already, really good at drawing or good at lettering, I think I try to challenge each one of them at a specific levels, so that one, I tend to get bored pretty quickly if the kind of work that I get is not interesting. And I can see some of the students, if I don't give them enough, they might get bored. So it's always trying to like see where they're at and then give them a challenge so that they can push themselves, or at least be satisfied with the work they're doing, because we're all there to learn. And they basically, that's kind of the main thing I have to make sure of. Like they're all like learning something, they're getting something out of this class. And we just finished the first term, and we had 22 students with 22 revivals of typefaces that, for the most part haven't been digitized before. And yeah, we had a presentation. I'm not sure when it's going to be online, but once it is, I'll share so that everyone can see. So like all the hard work they've put in. It's not just digitizing. It's like they studied the material, they studied all the related historical writings on it, and they did their own take, and they expanded it. So when we're talking about revivals, we're talking about printed historical sources that exists, on paper. Now turning that into a font is its own challenge, and they did a remarkable job at it. So really proud of that, and that's what I've been doing since the beginning of the year.
Were they assigned the typefaces, or did they get to choose them themselves that they were reviving?
No, they got to choose themselves. Yeah, that's also part of the challenge. It's like, because it's a global class, we're not limited with one specific library, let's say in New York City, if you were in New York, right? Everyone is everywhere. They have different access, different resources. So it's like, that's part of the vision of the program. It's like, how do we maximize their access to objects, and how can we help facilitate some of that? So some of the work they found is because on their local context, they had the library around, they know certain people, they were able to access that material. Things that perhaps would have been difficult in a local context where, you're limited by how far you can go, how far the commutes are. But having a global group really enables a lot of that flexibility. And also, Letter from Archive has a great online archive as well. So leveraging all of those different aspects, I think it's key. That was kind of like the plan, and I think it worked out pretty well. And once people look at hopefully if the video goes online, but so we're trying to prepare a little showcase so that people can also see all the amazing work that they've done. Because again, I'm really, really proud of it. It's only the first term, but we're all in it to win it.
I would love to see it. What types of things have you had to do to switch from teaching, I'm assuming in person, to virtual now that most of this, like, you've taught in person before, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that are different with, it sounds like this global aspect is like a positive, but I'm assuming there's other challenges around engaging students virtually.
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing is like everything is different online. So I was teaching in person, and then because of the beginning of the pandemic, we had to switch online. So what that meant is just trying to pretty much, from one week to another, figure out a way to take an in-person experience online. And that is hard. I think a lot of people struggle with that. Some people gave up. Like I was ready to just be like, I can't do this anymore. But like I mentioned earlier, no, for me, it's always a challenge, meaning that even though it was hard, I was always trying to figure out how to make this work. Like you said, the opportunity of being able to have access to a wider net of students from all over the world is so valuable that I figure I need to figure this out with my City College class. So again, City College is a different context than undergraduate students, mainly based in New York City. But then I started teaching display type at Cooper. And I think that was the first time where I was no longer like translating an in-person experience online. I was designing a class to be online from the start with no plans of going in person because, we didn't really know what was going to happen with the pandemic. So as I designed it online, I realized, okay, there's a lot of things that work and don't work. It's a lot of preparation. Like you really need to prepare everything ahead of time, depending on what kind of instructor you are. I'm the kind of instructor that puts themselves as a student. So as a student, I really thrive when instructions are clear and when there is no ambiguity in certain things. Like there can be open-endedness, which I appreciate, but I don't like spending time thinking about what's due next week or what is the project gonna be. Like those things should be very clear from the start, so I can start thinking ahead and planning and figuring out how I could challenge myself. With that mentality as a student, as an instructor, I'm already like figuring out the syllabus for the class, the outline, what's gonna be happening every week. But also being the student that I don't like being put in a box, I'm also figuring out room for flexibility. If, let's say, one specific lesson, they want to dive into something, a subject that's related, then I can offer that to them and be able to guide them. So that was part of some of the stuff that I was testing in the display type class. And also making it more than just type. It was also about culture and context, things that I think in type design education sometimes get kind of like put aside because, learning type is hard enough already. Being that my context is, Latin American in a field populated by white men, it's really hard not to bring those into the conversation, especially when the class that I'm teaching is also super diverse. So I think just having those conversations in class or in the work that they do, it makes it super relevant and also leads to different kind of work.
How do you balance teaching with your full-time job?
That's a good question. I think actually it's because the program, the classes are after work. I think they're easy to balance. It's more of the preparation work that, I end up some of the weekends preparing for class, putting lectures together, recording talks and things like that, or, emailing people so they can come and visit the class. It is work, but it's also not work because, I'm already talking to a lot of people outside of work. Like I have a lot of friends and people I know, via all these different activities that I do, running, cycling, just being online. And, as we chat, sometimes I'm like, hey, do you want to come to our class and show your cool work? And my students love your work. And that's how things sometimes come through, I think. And so it feels very seamless in terms of that transition. It's like, I'm part of this community, so I'm able to like bring people over. I think it would be much harder if I was completely removed and doing my own thing and then trying to teach. It would be, it's still possible, but I would just think it would be a little bit different of a challenge. But yeah, work and teaching, they complement each other. And yeah, how do I balance it? It's just being smart with the time. That's it. Trying to be a good time management skills, which I gotta say is not easy, but and always trying to improve on that.
Me too. How does teaching enhance your professional practice?
I think it's the same idea. It's just like when you talk to clients, you have to be articulate, you have to be concise, even more so than when you're teaching, because you're not dealing with students anymore. You're dealing with people who don't want something. It's not like their objective is not to learn from you, but if you can give them a nugget of inspiration, something that they could take away and perhaps use that to sell the concept to their higher ups or to the team at large. In that way, it can be a little bit similar, but it's definitely a different kind of meeting. But for sure, I think it definitely complements it. I've been more comfortable at speaking just because I'm doing it all the time. And that is something also that I try to instill in the students, in my students, even at City College. Like, if you want a career in design, you need to be comfortable talking about your work and trying to be articulate. And a lot of that comes from like writing, even before you say things. And then once you do enough writing, then you'll be able to kind of like off the cuff come up with solutions. So it's all a skill that needs to be kind of like nurtured and matured, and over time it'll become a little bit easier.
So I know you talked a little bit about this, but you started your own scholarship fund. So the topic of BIPOC people being underrepresented in the type design industry, how, I guess, through teaching and elsewhere, are you like sort of cultivating a space for people that are not traditionally like in this industry?
I think mainly it's just putting ourselves out there. That is usually my answer to this question. I didn't really have like all the people that I looked up to were white. So it's like, okay, is there anyone that has a similar experience? And that is not a negative thing. Like, there's always mentors from all different kinds of backgrounds, but it's always like the nuance of having someone who comes from your background and can understand a little bit more of your context. And I see the same in teaching in all the different aspects, right? If I'm teaching, I have mentors that are white. I have mentors that are Latinx, and it's just a different conversation. While there are mentors that are white, I think you do need more diversity so that people they can talk to you in your own context and different issues that arise. That obviously, I think your perspective on the work or the field could be narrow if you're only hearing from one specific group. Even if that group end up being people that look like you still need more voices. So in terms of underrepresented voices, I think through things like Typecrit Crew, I think I try to put out people who are interested in being open and being reached out to, which it's ultimately what it is, right? These are a group of people from all over the world that you could always reach out for a call, for a one-on-one on your type design project if you're a student, or just some sort of advisory.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Typecrit Crew and exactly like what it is? And I know you just kind of talked about it, but for people who don't know.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it came out of this idea of like, you don't have to be in New York City or have access to this geography to be able to, or even the language, to be able to meet with experienced type designers. There are experienced type designers everywhere, in Latin America, in Europe, in India. It's just a matter of like putting them all together in a list, or making this more accessible, and also making it clear about how to approach designers. So you just go back to like, what is Typecrit Crew? So Typecrit Crew is basically it started as an initiative, but these days it's more kind of like just a platform that allows students to reach out to experienced designers on experience in different levels of experience. We have people who just graduated from a program, may have 1 or 2 years, doing freelance in type. We have people who have been working on type for years. So Tom Foley, Charles Nix are also part of this initiative. They signed up. Emilios as well, and I think Terrence. So I mean, it's this idea that these are people who are open to talking to you, and all you have to do is send an email, schedule a time with them, and yeah, they're open. So it's a platform for sort of like one-on-one virtual interaction between students and sort of like working professionals or designers with experience in type design.
It's amazing.
And also thinking, what would I like to have as a student when I was starting out? Even in New York City, reaching out to someone via email to meet in person can be a little bit intimidating. especially like what am I going to talk about, or like what kind of restaurant to find, or which coffee shop, and like the inconvenience of commuting can also be very intimidating because like, oh, this person is traveling an hour to meet me, and so am I. Right. With online, you can also have things like this person didn't show up, or the meeting has to get canceled. But it's at least it's a little bit of a lower inconvenience than showing up to a place for an hour. Not this didn't happen to me, but imagine, like the fear that one always has, like I'm gonna go there, I don't want to be late, and obviously, the work has to be good. And like ultimately, all this like lowers the barrier of entry for people that want to meet designers and get feedback, or people that want to get more into this kind of like a quote like a mentorship of sorts. But there are other mentorship programs that people are also starting out. So, this is one way of doing it. There's many ways. And I think there's probably many more ways that this could also happen. You should probably try to start your own. I think the world needs more opportunities like this. I have calls every weekend, almost every weekend, with students from all over the world. And some of the questions I get, how did you get into type? Or could you give me a review on this typeface? Or trying to get more into kind of like the illustrative side of type. How do I do that? Or is my portfolio good enough for this program? Or who should I talk to about this specific area of type? And a lot of that is also help making type designers more accessible because, again, growing up or studying in New York City, a lot of the access I had was the proximity to the city, but also the access to the instructors. Type at Cooper does a really good job at introducing you to a lot of professionals, which whom you can like reach out to. So I was doing a lot of that, like buying people lunch, buying people coffee, showing them my work, getting feedback, right? With the expectations that I would get better at it in terms of my work would get better at it. That the physical limitation is not a limitation in the online world. Like you can really just reach out to anyone.
So true. Yeah, I'm obviously not a type designer, but I would have loved to have something like this when I was finishing school and like entering the creative world, just better access. Like I had my advisor, but that wasn't someone that was like working professionally in my field. So that would have been really nice to have.
Yeah. And you need all kinds, you need people who have experience, like or people that are retired as well, or people that they might have a completely different take from you or from someone else. And it's really up to you to like take all of that and, synthesize it in what really applies to you and what could be useful and what it is that you actually want to do. Like, do you listen to this person that tells you there's no future, or do you listen to this person that tells you can do this, right? What kind of feedback do you need? Because there are different ways of, I take both positive and constructive feedback, and it's always seen through like a critical lens where, I have an idea of what I want to do, and I have an idea of who to reach out to for feedback in that. And I think Type really helps connect people like that.
So tell me a little bit about the types of projects that you work on at Monotype, developing typefaces for pretty big names.
Monotype is a very special place because of the studio. And the fact that we are all remote, I think we've been remote for a long time. And in a sense, that's been kind of like a blessing in disguise, because when people were going remote, we were already remote and we were already talking to each other at different time zones. So the work that we're doing at Monotype, it tends to be very collaborative just by the very nature that we're all talking to each other. Even though, we work on separate projects, there's always the chance of like, can I get a review from someone in the team? And people will always rise up to the occasion. So that in itself makes it a very nice team to work with. And the kind of projects we do also like, quickly about, so like M&M's, which is the one that recently got a lot of notoriety. That project was really interesting because, I was collaborating with Charles, and then, some people in the team also offer feedback. At the end of the day, we all know what projects we're working on. And, if there's a chance to support each other, we do. You obviously draw letters, but then you need a second pair of eyes to draw letters. That's kind of how it goes.
And I know there was a lot of collaboration with the agency team, JKR, as well. So you got to collaborate with some designers from their side as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're really good. It's always good when you collaborate with a creative agency, because you send them the fonts and they make it look really good, and then that makes you want to do even better. Like it's like we always try to do better. But when you see the work in use, that gives you a different understanding of the work you're making. So you can spot, things that could be improved right away much faster once you understand not only the brief that you've been given, but also the context in which it's being used. So the function becomes much more targeted, and that leads to better and just like more refined, and sometimes it also helps speed up the process as well. Because if you send someone a team a pair of fonts, and they come back to you with like a presentation with the fonts in use, the iteration between type and design just happens so much faster. It can be a little bit more fun to have a different pace from other projects that take a little bit longer. So either pace is good, and I like the variety that we have at work. Some projects are longer, some projects are shorter, but with creative teams, they do tend to move a little bit faster.
Thank you, Juan. That was really enlightening and enjoyable talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about Juan and the work he does outside Monotype, visit juankafka.com or typecritcrew.com. Also, look for a link to our blog post in the show notes of this episode, and check out monotype.com/podcast to read about all of our prior guests. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate and review this episode. And if you really like us, subscribe to the show and share us with your friends. Creative Characters is a production of Monotype, Christopher Sound, and Marie Tabarez. We will be back with more episodes soon. Take care, everybody.